So just like Blue Peter, this is one that I prepared earlier. And as you can tell, it's way more detailed than other drawings that you'll find someone doing in Create Studio. Now, how did I achieve that? Well, I'm going to tell you here today. Now, if we look at the shadowing, this is just different layers of colour added on top of each other using a certain method. Now, usually when you make something in this software, let me just go ahead and create a random drawing here. Usually the steps that you take is to colour the object the colour that you want it to be. So in this case, red for instance. And then you go to gradient to try and get some diversity in the colour. So we look at this one, let's go pink. So now you can actually see that there is a gradient on this that goes from this pinky colour to this red. Now that is the usual way of doing it, and also with this you can also add the drop shadow. That is something that I probably should have mentioned alongside the gradient. And then when you apply the drop shadow from settings, it's going to make it stand out. And that does kind of look professional, it looks good. It doesn't look too bad, but how are you meant to add extra detail? Well, I'm going to teach you how to do extra detail when doing something like this. And I'll just keep this example here for now. But another thing that we can do before we go on to that, you can also add an inner shadow to your artwork that you've done. Just like that. Oh, that's a little bit too dark for me. But as you will notice as I rotate the colours, it actually does give a new style and a new blend to the actual artwork. Adding the red also adds to our gradient colours that we've got going on. Blue, pink and red for a kind of stylized look here. And just keep rotating the colours until you find one that you like. There's different ways of doing it. Obviously you can add blur, distance and also the angle. It's not bad, but as you can see, it does actually affect the line work of our created object, which is something that I personally don't like in my artwork unless I'm going for that desired effect. I prefer to have the definition of the line work represented, as you can see from this image down below. So I'll go ahead and delete that, but let's now look at if you want to create shadows, and some of the methods including the advanced method that I like the most. So the first shadow that we're adding is more of a traditional way of doing it. This is a kind of shadow that you would find maybe in like Japanese animation. This is a regular normal cartoon shadow. There we go, so you do that. Then you'd go out to pick your colours. What colours do we want? Maybe a skin tone. Ah yeah, a darker skin colour would probably be better. Makes sense for a shadow on the skin, right? So what you normally usually do is go over to here, opacity, and you'd bring that down. That is basically the standard way of doing things. So there you go. It's not good. This is not a good shadow. Obviously it was done fast. And you can actually, if you zoom in, see some mistakes. But that is a normal methodology if you're gonna do some kind of basic shadow. But if we zoom in here, as you can tell with Create Studios, if you get close you can see with the border here, it goes our normal colour that we picked to a darker colour and then back to the colour that we had. Which I find to be absolutely gross. You need to take the border off if you plan to do this normal method. Look at this, look how bad that looks. That is just no, I can't do that. So you definitely want to take off that border, because that does look a little bit better. Oh, this is wonky, this is going to do my head in. Let me just do a quick little fix to this. I'm overlapping, I'm not even bothered. So you've created this shadow, which is more the traditional way of doing the shadows, but it doesn't look that detailed, does it? And doesn't particularly blend in well with the other shadows in comparison to them and the rest of the image. So how do I get this effect where it's smooth and seems to be blended in? So let's go back up to the shape that we made and the settings. I think we're already using pretty decent opacity settings, so I'm going to keep that as it is. And what we're going to do now is go over to blur, which in my opinion is the most powerful effect that you'll find within Create Studio, especially if you're doing your own artwork. And you'll see right now, as I'm blending this colour, how much better that looks in comparison to that other not so great shadow that we just did. The difference, you can tell immediately, that is wildly better. Oh, and also this shadow effect does actually work on photographs, not just the artwork that you made. So we'll go ahead and drop this picture on the timeline, so we can actually add a shadow to this, and this was the original photo to the artwork that I did. We can add either shadows or highlights to this woman using the same methodology. With the pathing tool, I'm just going to go ahead and make the shape of what I think the shadow would look like. Obviously, this is a made-up shadow, so it's not going to look perfect either way. It's made up. Shouldn't exist. There we go. You will find as you do this to your photos as well as your drawings, a lot of it is trial and error. Going back to effects, dropping in the blur, and then turn that blur right up to blend it into the rest of the environment or the rest of the picture. Actually, we can change this colour either to a preset that we already have, or the better option, taking a shadow that's already on a face, and then you actually have some kind of colour correction within your edit. Okay, so let's move away now from shadows and talk about highlights if I wanted to add an highlight to this drawing that I've done. You basically do the same just as the shadows, but instead of using black, you use white. And I found in Create Studio, a slightly off-white is the better option than a pure white, as it seems to blend in a lot more naturally. I've got my own custom colour because, again, pure white doesn't seem to blend in quite well with the illustration. So again, just like we did with the shadows, drop that opacity and also add the blur. And it doesn't matter which order you do it in, you can do it either way. That goes for both the shadows and the highlights. Whichever way is the most simplest in the moment, I guess. So as you can see, we now have this new light source hitting the bun. So we can go ahead and blend that in, or like make it stand out a little bit more, make it softer, make it sharper. Just really playing around with it until we get the desired effect. For this example, I want that pink to show through. You can use multiple layers in order to soften it up and make it look a little bit more rough, and that is depending on what kind of texture you want to gain as well. So that overall looks pretty good, a decent highlight on her bun. So another advanced thing that you can do is group all your individual layers that you've drawn together, which is pretty awesome because as you can see here, I can move her freely around without needing to select each individual drawing piece that I did. And one of the major benefits of doing this is that you can actually go over to other effects, such as an example right here will be in a shadow. And as you can see, when you drop it on the entire group, it'll apply the effect to the entire group as it appears on your preview, not applying it to each individual layer, which would look really awful. And this grouping effect also works if you want to do it for animation, say if you want to do it for a video and actually get your image to move, which is pretty awesome. So for this next part, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this all sped up. And what I'm doing here is showing you how you can add colour to basically any photograph by using this same blurring and opacity method. So as you will see as I go on editing here, that you can in fact do like colour isolation and do more advanced masking stuff. This will actually be very familiar to you if you ever used any other kind of art-based program, or if you've used other programs like Photoshop. In the photo, I isolated the colours and decided to go with blue eyes, and then masked the background, and made the background all black, but the image of the person still stood out, and I think it really made the eyes stand out too. When doing this method, you can also use the opacity, well, in order to get the background showing through the colour that you choose for your background. And you could even probably add extra images in there and mask it that way. So doing this and using that pathing tool is very creative. There's a lot of things that you can actually do with this. There is also advanced methods of adding reflections into your photos, but I think that's going to have to be another tutorial. So basically the order that you want to do is you want to do your line artwork first, add your colours and then your gradients, and then start thinking of the lighting and composition within Create Studios using those shadow and highlight methods that I've shown, which you can also do for colour as well. The best effects for when you're actually doing your own created artwork is definitely that blend in a shadow, and also maybe a bit of feathering as well. That would be decent too. Oh, not to mention the filters. There is a posterized filter, although it's not very good. Some of the filters are a bit hit and miss. I also recommend that if you are doing like your own artwork, to not utilize drop shadows too much. Instead, use this shadow method, and that goes for if you're trying to lift a subject off the page. Instead of using drop shadows, which are just like a generated shadow, it is definitely best to do it more of this freehand way, because it will blend in the image that you're doing a lot better, and it will just come off a lot more natural. So that has been just some of the methods that I use when doing concept art within Create Studio. Oh yeah, this is Create Studio Pro, by the way, it's not the regular one. If you want to know my honest thoughts, feelings and opinions on this particular software, then I have actually done a video on this channel of that. So go check it out. Anyway, like the video, give it a thumbs up if it helped you out, subscribe to the channel if you are new, it would be much appreciated. I'm only a small channel here, so every little helps, as you would expect. Anyway, I have been Tech from Tech Evolved, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!